Morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about should you change carriers? Sometimes you are comparing and contrasting, one big box carrier to another big box carrier. You're like, well, the grass is slightly greener. There's a different hue to it. It's a different shade of green over there, and it's, sometimes it's enticing. I mean, companies are competing for good quality drivers, and they would welcome you with open arms. But should you change? That's the question. I've been here with Crete for 10 years. In that 10-year time span, I threatened to leave 3 different times. And one time I submitted my formal written two-week notice. See ya, I'm out of here. But then I stayed. Eventually I stayed. Circumstances changed and I ended up staying. But what I've seen with a carrier like Crete is they improved over the years. There were some times when it was kind of rough. Obviously, no corporation's going to be perfect. But do they try? And are they on a path of continuous improvement? And that's what Crete's demonstrated to me over the past decade was they get better slowly. Eventually, they figure it out. Took them a while, but they got there. Change doesn't happen overnight. And with these big box carriers, they're like an aircraft carrier. They can't turn in a sharp radius. It takes them a long time to make a turn. They are large and they're not nimble. So they probably know they need to make some changes, but they can't do it fast enough because of their size. Big bodies can't move quickly. It takes them a while to complete the turn. So that's kind of like what it was with Crete. They got there, but it took them a long time. A lot of times drivers look at carriers and they're like, well, I could make 5 cents more per mile over here. Another carrier, I can get more miles over here. This one has more benefits. This one gives me better home time. This one has better equipment. This one does maintenance really well on their trailers. This one's drop and hook, so on and so on and so on. The list of reasons are endless. I think if you're comfortable with the carrier in, then don't leave. I'm at the point now that Crete's made enough changes that it's okay. It's like I could see myself staying here and not having the need or the desire to go somewhere else. If you want to make more money as an owner operator, like here at Crete, don't ask the company for a 5 cent per mile increase. Typically, the better way to go about it is run more miles or cut your expenses. That would be the most effective way. If you're waiting for a raise, you're going to be waiting for a long time. They don't come very often, and the reason they don't come very often is not because the carrier's not willing, it's because of market conditions. When you got so many foreign drivers, hauling cheap freight, they can't raise prices. You're lucky they didn't cut your wages, So, yeah, you need to make more money because the cost of living went up, inflation went up, the cost of truck repairs went up, the cost of fuel, varies. It's up, it's down, it's up again. Inflation could be, as high as 21% increase from the previous administration, but yet your rate per mile did not go up. So it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. So you start thinking, I need to change carriers. It's like, well, do you really need to change carriers? Are there other ways that you can boost, your productivity? Can you look for cost savings, in your operations? can you earn revenue outside of driving? So let me give you some examples. If you're only running 10,000 miles per month, that's fine, but as owner operator, your costs are fixed costs. So the more miles you run, the more profitable you become. So instead of running 10,000 miles a month, maybe you go 11,000 miles per month. You go from a gross revenue of $200,000 a year to a gross revenue of $220,000 for the year, something like that. You look at where can you save in your operations. Do you hit all the fuel solutions? The fuel discounts are big. It could be anywhere from 50 cents off per gallon from the list price at the pump price. It could be 50 cents a gallon less or $1 less if you follow the fuel solutions. Can you shop around for parts and services, repair services? I know, like Freightliner, if they do a lot of business with Crete, they'll give you a Crete discount. It's like 5%, something like that. Even Peterbilt will give you a Crete discount. Ask for those discounts. Can you order parts through Crete's part department rather than, let's say you need an engine air filter? Okay, if I go to Peterbilt and ask for the OEM PACCAR part number for the engine air filter, it's like $350 or more from the dealer. But if I order it through the Crete parts department, I get it for less than $200. That's kind of like giving yourself a raise. So on one hand, you're always looking to get more money from the carrier, and on the other hand, you generate your own raise. You generate your own savings because you're running more miles, you're looking for all the discounts, you're taking advantage of what the carrier has to offer. So if you miss all the discounts, you're never going to have enough money. If you're always paying full price, you're never going to have enough money. So I would say before you decide to change carriers, try to maximize the opportunity. You're missing, large bites out of the apple, because it's not plainly obvious to you. It's not delivered to you on a silver platter. You got to work to get those discounts. You got to put in for some effort. Now, things that make a carrier worth staying with are, how easy does it make they make it for you to run your business? During the winter storms, Crete started paying drivers not to drive. That's pretty cool. So I sat in northern Mississippi during the last ice storm, and I sat there for 5 days. I got paid. Other drivers who were sitting next to me got no pay. So that shows the kind of carrier you're with. I think that speaks volumes. But Crete didn't always do that. They just started doing that in the last year or two. So there was other times when you didn't get paid. Now you get paid. That's improvement. That's continuous improvement. And Crete does that throughout the company. They have little initiatives that they're trying to get better all the time. They redo their facilities, to state-of-the-art facilities. It was an absolute shithole. It was like the worst place in the world you'd ever want to park or take a shower. And then they turned it into a state-of-the-art facility with plenty of parking. That's amazing. So I don't look to change carriers to look for 5 cent per mile increase. I look at my own operations and say, okay, how can I become more efficient? How can I maximize the opportunity in front of me? The other thing is that I'm a super saver. I save my money. I take what money I have and I save and invest. I buy stocks, and I have a portfolio It's grown substantially over the years, and it gives me an extra $25,000 or more a year in income on a return on my investment. So I don't, I'm not going to change carriers for 5 cents more per mile when I'm earning an extra $25,000 a year because of my investments. I have no desire to leave Crete to join Schneider or Mercer or Landstar. I'm doing perfectly fine. Just stay right where I'm at. Continue to save. Continue to invest. They've improved in their areas of weaknesses. That's all you can ask, is for them to improve. And I continue to invest my money. If you're in a carrier that's fairly comfortable for you, I would suggest that you try to maximize the opportunity wherever it may be. It doesn't have to be at Crete. Learn how to invest your money. You may find that everything you're looking for is right there. You just weren't maximizing the opportunity. You left too much on the apple. You took a few bites and you're like, oh, this isn't good enough. There's a lot there that you haven't even taken advantage of. If you talk to the senior owner operators, these guys are more than willing to share how they became successful. Do you think they drove a million miles in just a few years? They learned a lot along the way. They know where the pitfalls are. They know the best strategies, the best tactics. They know the best equipment. They know how to maximize everything the company has to offer, and they're willing to share. But you got to be willing to listen, and you got to be willing to put forth the effort. And you got to be willing to learn, and it probably is a good carrier. Is there a better carrier out there? Well, probably, but the question isn't whether or not is there a better carrier out there. The question is it worth making a change? Can you create your own opportunities? Can you satisfy everything that you want from where you're currently at? If you haven't even tried, then why are you even thinking about changing carriers? You haven't even given the carrier you are with your best effort. And they may be bad, but in 5 years' time they could turn things around. You have to weigh all these things. If you're with a bad carrier, there's no doubt you're going to leave. I would suggest you come to Crete, but there are other good carriers. Crete's not perfect, but they do try. That's all I can ask is try. Are there bad people at Crete? Well, they employ probably 7,000 people. There probably are a handful of bad apples somewhere in the company. But people come and people go all the time. All the time. People retire, people leave, people get fired. There's regular turnover. I wouldn't let a few bad apples dictate my choice of whether or not to stay or go with a carrier. I've had my head butting moments, and I persevered. It's like, you're not going to chase me anywhere that I don't want to go. You're not going to chase me out of this corporation just because you're an idiot. There's 7,000 people who work here, and one of them is an idiot. The other 6,999 want me to stay. This idiot wants me to leave. I'm not leaving because of one idiot. And over the years, I even had situations where those button heads turned into a more cordial working relationship because I stayed. They're like, well, you're not going anywhere, so I guess we're going to have to get along. I was like, yeah, I'm glad you finally figured that out. You're not going to force me to do anything I don't want to do. So as an owner operator, you have a lot within your own control. Should you change carriers? Well, if you're not happy and you don't think your company or your carrier you're with is going to change, then, perhaps. There's times when I wasn't happy, but eventually things improved. It took a while, but when I look for additional money, I look at my own operations first. I don't look at the carrier. I'm like, okay, I need to grow my wealth. Obviously, I'm not going to get an increase in my rate per mile, so I need to get good returns on my investments, and I need to look for efficiencies with discounts in my own operations. That's how you get your increases. That's how you generate your wealth. If you're waiting for the company to give you an increase, you're going to be waiting a long time. So this is something to think about. Is it worth changing carriers? First, trying to maximize your opportunity. Once you've done that and you're still not happy, then you can start thinking about changing carriers. But if you haven't even explored every avenue, you haven't tried to maximize your opportunity, then you haven't even put forth the effort. And changing carriers isn't going to change anything. You'll be unhappy with the new carrier as well. So, this is my perspective on whether or not you should change carriers. Depends on you. What you're looking for. If you don't put forth the effort with the carrier you have, there's no guarantee that the next carrier is going to be any better. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. So watching. We'll see you on the internet.